Hi everyone, welcome to Accolite Digital Connect, our thought leadership series on the latest in technology. I'm your host, Shrikant Pallai, and the head marketing for Accolite Digital. Today's speaker is Anand Chandra. Anand heads pre-sales for the BFSI vertical and is also the growth leader for Europe and Asia PAC. He's going to speak on a very interesting topic, which is unlocking value by building the API economy. Now, before I hand it over to Anand, if you have any questions during the session, would request you to post it in the comment section and we'll be happy to take it post the session. So Anand, over to you.
Thank you, Shrikant, and welcome all. It's a very nice way to present where I can just see myself and the presentation, and I'm not overwhelmed or tensed by the audience on the other side. So it's the virtual world we are all in. I hope everyone is safe, sound, and healthy. Today's conversation is on unlocking the value of API economy and how does the IT infrastructure touches upon that. Before I do the slide where just wanted to lay it out, it's well established the fact that the consumers in the API marketplace are not just consumers anymore. They are co-creating the value as we speak. I think that fact is well established. Now there is a finer establishment of what we now see it as consumers, producers, and providers. And when you look at it from that finer alignment now in the current gamut of the business, there is a high degree of synergy that sets in. And then there is a sharing of certain challenges. I'll touch upon both. From the synergy perspective, firms that are able to deploy, launch APIs for their offerings to their internal customer base are at boom right now. Platforms who are able to then rebundle internal as well as third-party offerings and then make an outreach to their established customer base are at a boom right now. Now, there has been a surge of APIs getting launched, and you open up any investment bank, any financial services, any insurance, and they have their own open API, sort of a marketplace where you can actually connect and hook. Now, the next stage to all of this is where you would see a high degree of synergy that is happening between the three. And what we now see is called as premium APIs. It has been there for a while, but the premium APIs are essentially, I would call it, paid bundle of high value APIs that can create new shared revenue stream in a partnership model across selected market participants. And that is what is a high level representation that you see right now. Is the monetization topology. You have consumers, the fintech SME retails, you have the producers, and then you have the providers. The value chain of premium API is slightly different than a free API. Free API is out there. Premium API is a slightly dialect of what one side can do and how the other side can consume it. Now, all the three stakeholders or the connects, specifically for the bank, they operate in this gamut, and you might have read it in some of the articles and publications. Some act as aggregators, some act as distributors, some act as orchestrators. Now, from a monetization topology viewpoint, there are certain challenges that all three are trying to solve. There is challenges on SLA unification. You honestly don't know the ACNAC model that sets in. Infrastructures are different. Then one of the other challenges that the market participants are facing is an authentication journey. Is how do you actually authenticate at what point? Infrastructures are different, technologies are different. Some have a very high spend appetite, some have a very low spend appetite, yet their value chain participation is at par, but their spend appetites are different. And with that said, some people are very heavy on handheld devices. Some are very heavy on AR, VR technologies, and while some are very desktop and UI based platforms. And lastly, and it's quite common, it's very cliche, is the data asset part of it. Now, with all that said, there is still, you can't ignore the fact of the synergy that is absolutely creating some amazing case studies and scenarios in the industries as I speak. And how does that premium API value chain or the value creation formula looks like? So the next slide, before I bring it in, slight disclaimer, it's my handwritten. Please excuse my handwriting. If you are not able to read a character or space, just let me know and I'll explain you what that sits in. Now, the value creation formula, when I set the stage for the slide, you probably expected something very fun and fancy, but it's pretty straightforward. There is no rocket science to it. The regulation that have been cut so far have created a high degree of competition. And that was the purpose of the regulation. And it evolves to the next stage. And we will cover slightly in the latter part of the presentation. What it has resulted in is a faster credit availability for people. What we call it digital payments is one example of it. Buy now, pay later is an alternative payment. Elements are absolutely surging the way you look at it. It has produced better pricing because you can compare, quote, and buy. It clearly has generated a lot more interest. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at Transport for London, I'm based out of UK. If you look at Transport for London has a hub of data in terms of their commuters on what and how they do. And the data is on their travel pattern, their buy pattern, their location pattern, in which part and which time of the year, how they travel. But they are not a company that would invest in a lot of apps. So what they've done is they have exposed them as premium APIs. Now there are small third parties, what you call it, quantified API developers or providers, who are actually building some amazing apps that are integrated to your maps, that are integrated to your different resellers, e-commerce firms that are there in the station trying to sell their services. And they actually know when who or she is going to be traveling at what point in the station, and you actually get notified. Now that's amazing, right? And these apps are then at the disperse of Transport for London. Now TfL has not necessarily written these apps. All they have done is they have monetized that data. Now, if you look at the travel packages, the vacation packages that are coming from, I'll give an example of British Airways. Apologies if my examples are very region-based, but this is the region I'm observing a lot. If you look at British Airways, huge number of updates to their website. That is largely to integrate as many APIs as they can from third-party providers, right? And to book a package deal, you honestly don't go anywhere now. You go to British Airways website, and they can actually set the mood and tone of your packaging, of your vacation. All you do is pick and choose. Everything is taken care of. Your taxi, your airfare, your hotel, your food, your drop, your pickup, your favorite shopping places in the place you go. Everything is in one-stop shop. This is how premium APIs are changing the way you look at it. Now, these are just a couple of examples. Then there is example of Uber, there is example of Amazon, there is example of the way you look at the entire digital payments, the way it sits in. Majority of it sits in the premium APIs, right? We are consuming it as part of the services that we buy, but we don't necessarily buy them as one APIs, right? Now, that creates the more interest, higher curation. It's a causal analysis, and that's what we are seeing right now. And that is amplifying the funding structures. Now, premium APIs back in the day were ultra expensive to actually curate, generate, distribute, and consume. Now you have a very, very flexible funding structure. You can have it free plus premium. It's almost like your Bloomberg data consumption. Anything on gigs, you can actually consume at a paid service, whereas every other mnemonic from Bloomberg, you can consume it as free, of course, through an FTP structure. Now that amplification has led to deployment of these APIs. Now you can buy them in a tiered model. You can actually buy them, pay now, use as much as you want, and pay a fixed price after a particular. It's almost like buying an internet. Pay as you go, pay as you use, and then there is a fixed price pricing. Now, this is how more development is happening. That is creating further enriched APIs. Now, that automatically is causing more producers. Now, these producers are essentially, let me give an example from a bank perspective. Now, these producers, the banks, they are consuming it as part of their API marketplace. They are playing a role of an aggregator, distributor, orchestrator. And then there is huge demand that is getting created. From a consumer-based perspective, these premium APIs would have never seen the sight of a consumer or a customer. Now they see through these swanky UIs, which are now built through high budgets from big banks and big institutions, which otherwise was not possible. In some cases, the APIs are fronting. In some cases, the big institutions are having the front face or the client interface. Everything is customer centricity. All of that, again, feeds into the competition part of it. Now, that's a cyclic loop. Very simple value creation, nothing complex. There is no empirical aspect in terms of moving aspect to a formula, static parameter to a formula. This is very straightforward. And you might think, if it is that straightforward, why is it not necessarily hit you in terms of your day-to-day activities? In fact, it has. It has in several and many ways. You look at your subscriptions that you take for your digital streaming, you look at some of the purchases that you make. There is, if you even play a simple game online, there is an in-app purchase on your phone when you do it. These are all paid aspects of the business. Certain features are locked, you unlock them by paying additional, and then those features are then made available to you through some of the API connects, right? And this is how the entire industry is now relooking at it. Now, in the time that we have, I honestly cannot take one use case at a time and go to the next stage and take a deep dive. But in this series of our Digital Connect, what we're going to do is we're going to have these multiple sessions. The next session is on embedded finance. Within that session, we will only touch upon the premium APIs that are actually creating that value chain, but for a very specific customer base. And we will then do a walkthrough of that use case. And you will get a better understanding of how it is actually touching every individual, every human as we speak, of course, from a digital world, interconnectivity, hyper-connected ecosystem point of view. Yeah. Now, at the end of it, the value creation formula exists largely from a customer centricity perspective. It is not disassociated from a customer, and everything is around that customer base. If you have to see premium APIs in 2022 and 2023 sorts, just a 2-year plan that I'm looking at it, and the assessment and the study that the Accolite thought leadership team is doing, it's going to continue to build on high value, high revenue stream. It would still be in a shared services model. We don't see, especially in some of the amazing engagements that we are embarking upon, we have embarked upon, and some of the work that we are doing for the boutique payment agencies, payment aggregators that we have as our customers, the work that is being done is still going to be in a shared revenue model. We do not necessarily see the trend that has happened to blockchain in terms of side chains and rechains. It's still going to be in a very shared model as we see. When we say we selected marketplace, it's not being not inclusive. It's still very open for everyone. But then the size, scale, the geographies would vary. And that's how some of the premium APIs would make a much, much more stronger penetration in certain regions and geographies. Let me give you an example. Australia still does not has payment initiation model. It's still in a it's still in a group 2 model when it comes to industry pioneers or region pioneers on open API or open banking, as we say, right? Accumulation of data, what has been accumulated, and now what we call it customer insights. 4 out of 10 engagements of Accolite, they are on data science and analytics, and they are simply on client insights. Very straightforward. It's not necessarily emerging tech anymore, but that's the ground reality of it. At a grassroots level, it's what data now is being used is not to retain, but is to reinvent the value chain. That's the intent of the entire data accumulation. Huge amount of data is being accumulated by the providers. If you remember the first slide, you had consumers, producers, and providers. Now, providers, corporates, governments, big institutions, they're actually accumulating that data. The developer, the fintechs, they are accumulating that data. So there is a lot of synergy that is happening. And then I'll give you my own example. Today, when I want to bank the way I want to bank it, when I want to bank it. I think that's quite common for all of us. I don't remember standing in a queue. I mean, I'm giving you very recent examples. I have stood in the queue, but I'm just giving recent examples of doing a banking transactions. It's pretty straightforward. It's at our fingertips. And the way I want it, in a platform of choice, I want it. You don't have to sit somewhere at a particular time to do a banking transaction, which was the case. It's quite frictionless. The consumer and the firms, they are actually, the entire participation of consumer and the ecosystem is frictionless nowadays, right? And that is what is going to be continuous part, and it is largely attributed to premium APIs. And like I said, one of the topics that we're going to look at from a modeled use case of what these exotic stuff means, premium stuff means, how do you distinguish largely between free, can only be well established should you need to take one use case deep dive. In the embedded finance, the way you look at, I would say, the banks are looking at wealth, the banking functions in terms of, let me dig up some of the examples from my mind notes. Your overdraft fees, how do you unbundle that from your banking transactions? Your credit score, your taxation, if you look at it from the viewpoint of a non-banking structure, there is a lot of real estate infrastructure that they are consuming premium APIs to give you that exotic service, which otherwise would have been a much more, I would say, cumbersome process of consuming that service. Where else do we see the premium APIs playing a bigger role? The most interesting that now I see is bespoke lending. Now that touches loans, mortgages, securities finance, broker-dealer operations. Now, these bespoke lending is not necessarily the process that currently exists today, where you have to go check for your scores, how much your eligibility sits in. In fact, it happens much faster now because the premium APIs have already interfaced into the environment. But now you would see a lot more of it. You would see a lot more of these bespoke lending opportunities coming to you. You're going to see a huge amount of purchases. You're going to see a lot of spend appetite. Suddenly, you're going to discover a lot more, because previously you had to do a lot of homework to go into an investment. Now, premium APIs would do everything for you, and it would actually come to your doorstep. And it's almost like you walk into I don't know how many of you had the privilege, because I was absolutely stunned when I walked into the Amazon Go store. You walk in, you pick what you want to your shopping cart, and then you walk out. That's like nirvana shopping. Or you log into Netflix, you are not sure what you want to watch, but Netflix tells you what you want to watch today because it's Tuesday, and that's what you do on a Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? That's the level of sentiment that would gauge. I think that's how we would see a bit of embedded finance hitting in a lot of your spend patterns. And it's entirely about premium APIs now. Majority of our work is around that. So we are super excited. A lot of it needs to be done from our end as well. So we are contributing towards that. But I think that is what Accolite today wanted to bring forward. With that, I'll take a pause. I'll hand it over to Shrikant for any questions or anything that has come up on the chat. And I would also thank for anyone, for your time. Unfortunately, I can't see you all, but I'm pretty sure it was a wise use of your time. So thank you. Shrikant, all yours.
Yeah. Good, Anand. It's a very insightful session. I'm sure the follow-up series is also going to be quite insightful too. I have one question which has come in, which is more about what are the regulatory impacts around open banking API? Any thoughts around that?
It's a question I knew it would come, and it's almost like scripted. So regulation is an interesting topic. I have had some sleepless nights doing MiFID 2, and I'm pretty sure audience on the call is actually laughing and smiling. And you chase regulation deadlines. They are quite sacrosanct that ways. But one thing that you would see in the open API space is you're almost co-creating that regulation, tailor-made. Of course, regions like UK, they are much ahead in terms of drafting that remediation process, structure process. Then there is a bucket of several regions. What I'm trying to say is regulation in case of an open API is not necessarily thought as a challenge, but it is more of a co-creation between the regulators and the ecosystem where everybody wants to make it work. So there is a high degree of flexibility that I see. Typically, there is a tug of war between implementer and the regulator, but in this case, it's almost like a co-creation. Very matured regulatory boundaries have been created on consumption and distribution, but largely the regulation is driven by geo-socio-political economic situations, and you see it very commonly in blockchain. Main two levers of regulation for open banking is inclusivity of financial organization. You don't want to look at from a big and large scale. You don't want to create monopoly. And then the other is protection of data. I think that is where majority of the work is happening for all the regions. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a combination of forces.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. The second one is around how is emerging tech shaping up the surge into unlocking the API economy, right? I think tech is always a very interesting topic. So I'd like to know your views on this.
No, absolutely. And technology eats breakfast, or rather technology eats the orientation of something that needs to be done in breakfast, right? Technology, once it comes in, it just takes over everything. And I'll give you an example. There is an organization, we all know of it, we breathe into it. Wasn't more than 200 million 6-7 years ago. It's 1 trillion in revenue. It's the largest organization. People are going to space and coming back from that organization. Now, what is happening for the organization? Well, it's not a client name, so I can say it. From an Amazon perspective, it has fundamentally embraced the premium APIs to the way it is, and it has created itself a value chain which is unheard of. And it is entirely based on the principles of premium API. The more you produce, the more you distribute, the more you bring in your internal offerings into the customer and you consume, the better for all the ecosystem. 60-70% of the revenue of Amazon comes through premium APIs, whether it's their online stores, whether it's their physical stores, whether it's their entire retail industry that sets in. Even their payments for their web services from a cloud perspective still are connected to premium APIs. They still quantify and quantum them. I think the likes of analytics and AI, data science, the way you have remodeled, rebuilt some of the design patterns, it's all up there. I think emerging tech is really, really boosting the distribution and I would say adoption and inculcation of premium APIs. Amazon is a classic example. It's a tech firm. It's a tech firm that has outbeaten everyone in terms of market share. I think that's what it sits in. Tesla is another example that connects everything through premium APIs. Yeah. So I don't know, Shrikant, if that answers the audience question, but I think that's where it's and at least we are seeing in our engagements when it comes to data science, analytics, and AI.
See, there's a third one which has come in wherein the audience is more interested in knowing the embedded finance use case. right?
Sure.
So do you think you will be able to pick it up now, or maybe have it as a separate session altogether subsequently?
No, I'll do a teaser or a precursor of that session now, in the interest of time. And me talking for too long can also cause a bit of a jitter. So I'll try to keep it short. I'll give you an example of embedded finance. Everyone, I'm assuming everyone knows SWIFT. Now, SWIFT from a counterparty bank exchange has fundamentally changed the way you look at your integrated payments. And while you are having a SWIFT transaction of your counterparty settlement, now suddenly you can actually have some of the movement of your, remainder surplus from a sweep viewpoint and actually generate a lot of cash positions for you. That's embedded finance. You would have to write a chunky middle office application or a product control applications back in the day to actually do this now, or do back in the day. Today, you don't have to do anything. The second example is very specifically for small and medium enterprise exchanges, what we call it SME clients, and it's called as Autobooks. I think TD Securities is the bank that has actually created that embedded finance model. And what it allows is the settlement between your books. They happen without much work based on how much surplus you have, which otherwise previously was through a plethora of chartered accountants and accounting system coming in. But all of this now happens through open APIs. You actually connect to different banking networks and you are able to communicate between your third-party providers. And that's how embedded finance is chaining. Last, I'll conclude embedded finance. And this is my favorite example. And you ask yourself, what was the last time you bought an insurance by actually going on to an insurance site for anything? You buy a home, you get an insurance. You buy a ticket, you get an insurance. You buy a visa, they actually give you insurance for your luggage, for your kids, for your people traveling beside you. And everything happens seamlessly. You don't need to do nothing. All of this is hyper-connected ecosystem. And it's still very secure, right? And that's what embedded finance is. It's the abstraction of business and technology from the consumer. Previously, those were visible to you. Now in embedded finance, both are not visible to you. They are abstracted. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what is changing the industry. We'll cover it in detail in our next session, Shrikant.
Yeah, good. Very interesting thoughts, Anand. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank our viewers also and look forward to meeting you in our next Accolite Digital Connect session. Thank you very much. Thanks, Anand.
Thank you all.